Welcome to the Pastor and Postmaster podcast. What you wanted to hear in the sermon, but you didn't.
Where the academy meets every day.
Hello.
And it's not every day that we get to have, a law enforcement officer with us today, actually, who is technically retired, Seth Cimino. Welcome.
A pleasure. Thank you, Pastor, for having
Seth.
me. Hello.
Well, tell us a little about yourself. I mean, we need to be careful what we say here. I mean,
Nobody wants to get arrested.
I know.
It's not against.
Well,
Too early.
Retired. It's like,
Too early.
I'm retired. That's
You're
right.
retired. Okay.
There's a lot less stress.
Brody has a story. Do you have any run-ins? Have you ever met? I don't think I've had any run-ins with the police.
Well, I've had numerous, but I have come to Christ, and thank goodness that is all behind me.
Yeah, well, that's it's a great actual thing to talk about. I know I remember there was a guy that came and spoke at chapel when I was in seminary. This is probably 12, 13 years ago. And he mentioned about the importance of chaplaincy in law enforcement, saying a lot of men who have been pastors have also been law enforcement. At least that was true in Nevada. So there's definitely, I think, a connection, a pastoral element to law enforcement. But Seth, I mean, I guess we should tell us a little bit about yourself, what you did, what you're doing now, maybe. So tell us.
Yeah, most definitely. Retired this year from full-time policing, almost 25 years in law enforcement with 3 different agencies here in Northern California. I was really fortunate in my career to do a lot of really fun things, a lot of fun assignments. Obviously, patrol is the backbone where you start, and then you build from there. I was a SWAT operator, a crisis negotiator. Spent the vast majority of my career working plainclothes or undercover narcotics, which was a lot of fun, to a point where I ran a team that had a helicopter assigned to it, and we would fly and look for illegal cannabis grows that were throughout the California forests that cartels and organized crime were setting up. I had a canine, which was awesome. For 6 years, I had a drug detecting dog. So much fun to be able to see those wonderful creatures work. There's probably things I'm forgetting about. Promoted, had an opportunity to run multiple teams, including a problem-oriented policing team. Did homeless navigator was assigned to my team. Code enforcement as well. So it was really neat in my career as I had a chance to chase bad guys, which was great, especially those that were basically terrorizing our communities as drug dealers. But then on the other side, have a chance to work very, very closely with our community through problem-oriented policing. So how does the community and the police department partner together to reduce crime and improve the quality of life? And it was a lot of fun. Had a chance to do a lot of public speaking events, spoke at city council on multiple occasions, spoke in front of department heads. And a lot of this expertise led to a really fun, I guess we'll say, side job or side hobby, where for the last 15 plus years, I've had a chance to travel the state and the country and teach other law enforcement officers about how to be a good narcotics detective. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've done all those things myself, actually, different times. I mean, helicopters, drug busts.
You bring up a day in the life of an officer, right? You see so many things, so much stuff happens, scary, dramatic, sad, funny. It's just another day at the office, for lack of a better term. Yep. But then when you tell people these stories that aren't involved in the profession or know a lot about the profession, they're astounded and flabbergasted by some of the things that are just normal for an everyday occurrence. Like you would be the hit of every party you went to if someone were to say, tell us something you did in cop work this week or whatever. And then they would be like, you really did that? And it was just another day at the office, right? And you know that going in when you're going to sign up, but the awesome thing about law enforcement, it was never the same thing twice. Every day was going to be different. You were going to face a whole bunch of challenges. You're going to face a whole bunch of successes. You were going to face a whole bunch of tragedies, but you knew that going in, and you problem solved your way through it, because the bottom line is that somebody calls you, a complete and total stranger, to fix or solve a problem for them that they could not solve themselves. It may have been a year, 2 years, 5 minutes, a decade, but they couldn't solve their problem, and they call you, a stranger, to help fix the issue that they have. There's a lot of weight in that, and I've always appreciated and never forgot what my role was in the community to for a period of time, be that fixer, be that rescuer. And it was fun to go from call to call to call and do a lot of great things, like exciting things. Do I miss it? A bit. I don't miss the stress. I don't miss the anguish. I don't miss that sort of stuff. I'm still involved in law enforcement circles per se with the teaching, but then in retirement, I work for a technology company that helps assist public and private partners. It could be HOAs, apartment complexes, hospitals, schools, but also law enforcement agencies in the same thing, reducing crime and improving the quality of life. So I'm still in the mix, but without the stress, I guess, in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to think about. You're still pretty young. I mean, so you think about a career. You've served that many years, and you're only in your late 40s.
Yeah.
And one interesting element. I mean, obviously in the news right now, it's front and center for everyone thinking about contemporary events, about what's going on in Minneapolis, about law enforcement and the relationships between what local and federal. But one thing that's almost assumed, but we could maybe talk about it here because you're doing the action, we're doing the theory.
Right.
We're talking about it in abstract.
Yeah, we're talking about just
war theory
like
and seminary
when Christians
classes.
Can be, when Christians can actually kind of, I don't want to say violent because I don't really see it as violence in the just war theory. I think it is using physical action in order to have a good outcome, when that is necessary. So, we're talking about the theory, but I mean, you're living it. Are you adjusting? Or were you an adrenaline junkie? Or because I know that's kind of an accusation that kind of police officers can get sometimes.
Two things I want to discuss. I want to talk about how the use of force is messy and it's not pretty looking. But to answer your specific question, am I adjusting? I thought I would miss it more, but I'll use this expression. You don't realize how far gone you are until you come back more to center. So for my entire adult life, 24 years and 10 months to be specific, I was involved in the law enforcement profession. So in thinking about it, law enforcement goes through these really, really high peaks and these really, really low valleys, what we would call like hypervigilance. My wife would describe it, and God bless her, I truly married up. I genuinely did. She is.
I love her.
She is absolutely amazing.
Hope you're a subscriber. No.
Yeah, a Christ-centered, godly, strong woman who loves the Lord. Awesome. Came from a Christian home. Wonderful parents. I married up for sure. But you go through these highs and these lows. She would describe it to me as she could see me. Literally, she would describe it as she could see me transition or change. So the afternoon before I would go to my next shift, I would become quiet and recluse. I would start to think about what potentially was going to happen, what I had in store the next week. And I would go from somebody who, is jovial and joking and someone who enjoys being around people and talking and
you're at ease.
Yeah. To really quiet. And I was really thinking about what the week would have. So I go through this the week or the night before work. And then depending on your shifts in law enforcement, every agency is going to be different. But the last agency I worked for, it was 3 12-and-a-half-hour shifts. Wow. So 3 days on, 4 days off, or 4 days on and 3 days off, which would be 4 10-hour shifts. So I would go into this state of hypervigilance the night before I would go to work. It would be a restless night's sleep. I would be up the next morning. I would go to work and I'd be Seth, but I was professional Seth. I was compartmentalized, and I would work that shift with whatever the shift brought forward. Easy, hard, sad, dramatic, fun, adrenaline filled, all the above. And I would keep that level of hypervigilance even when I went home that night. I would sleep with that level the next day, the next day, the next day. And after 3 or 4 days of this,
time to go back to work.
Yeah, well, after 3 or 4 days, I'm done with work.
Yeah.
And then I would go home, and it would take the better part of probably 12 hours to come off that, where I would go back to being somebody, myself, right? Because you have to come down from that state of awareness. People would say, oh, cops are paranoid. They think everybody's, out to get them or out to kill me. well, here, let's just say this.
Well, nowadays
you have to think that way.
Yeah.
To survive.
It's vigilance. That's exactly what it is. You have to be safe to protect yourself, the community, your partners, all the above. But to see that there were literally two Seths that lived. And in my life, I had a hard time for the vast majority of my career figuring out why I was so different until I started to really kind of retrospectively look at myself and say, why am I changing? Why do I change like this? And I became the supervisor of our peer support and wellness team at the department. And I started taking classes in peer support and wellness, self-care, understanding why I was feeling the way I was feeling, what I could do about that, what these emotions and these feelings were, and how to adjust to that. Never diagnosed, but I would say to a point that I probably have a mild form of PTSD or PTSI, post-traumatic stress injury, or for sure, just based off what I saw. And you see tragedy, you see violence, you see all this, and you're duty bound to do a job, and then you move on to the next call. People's lives are shattered in moments because of things that happen. You respond to tragedy, you do your job, you move on to the next one. We're talking about use of force. So force is not use of force. Officers using force, which they are allowed to do, reasonably necessary to overcome resistance, effect an arrest, protect property. Force is not pretty looking. It's not supposed to be pretty looking, right? Like putting someone in a twist lock or wrestling somebody to the ground or using an impact weapon or a baton or spray or a taser or firearm. It doesn't look pretty. It's violence. It is. It truly is. And we're afforded by the Constitution the ability to protect ourselves, protect others, protect the community, right? As long as it's reasonable, in a reasonableness standard, right? But to the average citizen who goes by and sees 2 or 3 or 4 officers jumping on somebody who may be under the influence of a controlled substance or something of that nature, and they have superhuman strength, which is absolutely true, and they're basically not feeling pain, they're wondering, wow, why did all these cops dogpile this guy or this gal, right? When there's more to it than that. And what you see a lot of times in the
cell phone clip.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What you see in the media is you see a 5-second clip of something that took 5 minutes to go through.
Right.
And we have what's called this, basically it's not called a continuum, but it's basically like force options. A continuum would indicate that you have to start with 1, move to 2, move to 3. You are adjusting immediately the situation. So a continuum would be someone pulls a gun on you and the first thing you do is put that down. No, you move to the level of force to meet the level of force that's presented to you.
Right.
So a lot of times you're starting with the command presence. You show up. You look nice. You look professional. You look stern. You look like you're there to mean business and help people out, depending on the situation. Let's say it's someone who may be a little unruly. And then your words, telling them, commanding them to stop. They still are not complying. Using some sort of physical touch, maybe a control hold or something, still not complying. And the level of force will escalate. This is the decision of the person you're contacting them. The vast majority, to the tune of, I don't know the numbers, but I'm going to be probably off a little bit, but less than 1% of all law enforcement encounters, far less than 1% of all law enforcement encounters involve a level of force.
Less than 1%.
Yeah, the vast majority of people are very, very compliant. But the person who you're engaging in that with, you are reacting to what they're doing. They're the ones that are dictating what's going on, and you have to overcome that for the safety of the community and yourselves.
You know what's crazy? I drive by a situation, and if I see multiple officers, I'll try to sometimes even pray for them because the attacks on our law enforcement are insane these days. It's absolutely mind-boggling how much it takes to do this job. Just sitting here listening to the litany of what it takes is just really eye-opening for me. And I think a lot of people, especially moms, because we have this protective, immediate protection, the mama bear. And so I really appreciate police officers because, we're like the kind of the weaker of them, right? Of them two genders. And so I really appreciate officers. And I always remember to pray for them. And I always remember to thank God for them. And I always remember to teach my kids to do the same. And this is why, because of course you have PTSD. That's crazy. And I mean, maybe even other things, but it takes a special person. I think for that in nursing fields, that takes a special person. So I commend
If only
that.
you knew someone in nursing.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That's what.
Yeah, what cops tend to marry nurses or teachers. That's kind of the way it all works out.
Seth's wife is a nurse.
But no cop
nice.
is looking to get into a use of force when they go to a call. Not a one. Nobody wants that. They want people to comply, to send people on their merry way, to do what they need to do. If someone has broken the law and we need to in effect and arrest, so be it. But we all want this within compliance.
And I think it's really easy also to Monday morning quarterback. I think a lot of our culture is like you're saying, there was 5, 10, 30 minutes, an hour, maybe you had the person detained or they were sitting on the ground, they were waiting and they just got tired. And it's like, then they film that 5 seconds where the altercation is. And then everyone can really kind of.
By violence right here.
Yeah.
Ryan's ready. Ryan's
Cut the clip.
Yeah. But the thing is just that a lot of times we're not in those situations and we can't necessarily understand what's going through the situation, especially as civilians.
Yeah.
It's very difficult for us to understand. And you hear this from idiots. Why didn't he shoot him in the leg? Like they have no understanding of
That's
what
what's so mind-boggling about the situation in Minneapolis to me is I'm like, there was all these big, in fact, the word compliant was being used to describe how, she would not comply. And so thus and such happened. But I mean, you end up seeing this big, long 5 minutes. This is what I was thinking of when you were telling me that, telling us this. There was like a big, 3-minute clip, 3 to 5 minutes of the whole thing of her going, stopping and blocking traffic for the federal agents. And so anyway, it wasn't just like this one thing that happened, this small amount of time. It's really nice to have that perspective from an actual law enforcement officer, because what we saw was a small clip. And then thank God we saw the bigger clip, which backs up what he's saying.
Yeah, for me, there was more satisfaction for me in talking somebody into doing something I wanted them to do when they didn't want to do it than there ever was in having to go hands-on with that person. Trust me, because when you go hands-on with somebody, a law enforcement officer goes hand on somebody, there's one gun in that fight, right? That you know of, at least yours. Heaven forbid the person you're fighting with is armed too, right? Yeah. And there's always somebody bigger, stronger, and
how common was that, Seth?
More skilled.
Was that was that like a weekly thing or was it like a monthly thing? How common is that to get in a physical?
It's pretty rare. I mean, you're going to get in physical altercations, but it's pretty rare. I mean, it happens. I mean, I couldn't give you an exact number. It depends on your calls for service. So the last agency that I worked for was dispatch would take in, between 250, 300 calls a day. So you times that out by 24 hours. Some of those calls were medical, yes, but I was running a team of 5 officers with me. So 6 of us handling a town of about 100,000 people, a little less than that.
Wow.
Dang.
Right.
Right.
And so here's another thing. Like we would be out in the community doing our stuff, and someone may say to me, "What took you guys so long to get here?" Well, I mean,
wow.
I understand that when you call the police and you need help, you want the cops to show up like yesterday to help
like
you.
30 seconds.
Like I get that. So what took you so long to get here? And I would say, well, I'm really sorry about that. And let's just say it was for like a cold auto burglary. Like what I mean by cold is that it had happened. It's not like an active in progress call. That would be a low priority call for us to go to. A high priority call would be a felony domestic violence in progress, a robbery in progress, a motor vehicle accident with injury, a fire with people trapped in a home. I mean, these are the priority 1 calls that you're going lights and sirens to, right? Yeah. And so what took you so long to get here? I'm like, hey, I'm super sorry. There's 5 officers working. I've got 2 on this domestic violence call. I got 2 more over here working with this person who's suffering from some sort of being under the influence or mental illness call. There's another officer that's on this side of town, so I'm here to help you out. And then when they realize that, oh my gosh, there's people getting hurt and beat up, there's people actively burglarizing homes or, pointing guns at people to rob them of their cell phone and their sneakers or a bank or a fire or something of that nature, they go, oh, I see why it may have taken you a couple hours to get here.
Well, I lived in San Francisco not too long ago, and they wouldn't even respond.
Yeah.
They could not unless it was an active shooting or something like that. I know people in San Francisco who had their homes broken into while the perpetrator was still there, and they were home, and the police still wouldn't respond.
I will say one thing about our agency, and yes, that's super sad, right? Because they're
Yeah.
overwhelmed. They're absolutely overwhelmed with
Right.
the calls for service. You can't send one officer to that call. You have to send at least two, and you may have one available, and everybody else may be tied up on stuff because it's not safe to send one officer to a call. I forgot what.
That's not what Home Alone was.
Yeah.
They send the one guy.
Joe Pesci shows up there. Hey, family.
Yeah.
Well, prior to this, the last agency I retired with, which was a municipality, I worked for a rural sheriff's office where one officer did go to calls. So for half of my career, there was 2 deputies and a sergeant for this entire county that would work a shift. And I remember very vividly responding to felony calls alone, domestic violence in progress,
Wow.
burglaries in progress, and doing all this by myself. I didn't know any better at the time because that was what
You're young.
Yeah, that's what you do, right? And looking back at it now, I go, oh, only by the grace of God was I not hurt or injured or even worse.
How does your approach to situations change when you're not having a partner with you? Someone's not with you on these calls.
Yeah, so you bring up a good point. It would be the level of engagement. So the way I would describe it is, let's say there's 20 calls for service that are pending for us to respond to. And I, as the shift supervisor, am looking at all these calls. I'm looking at calls that one person could handle. It could be meeting with, I'm trying to think of something that's like really basic. Let's just say, and this is a call we would respond to, and I'm very happy with the agency that I retired with. They responded to every call for service the community had, and I think that's awesome.
Wow.
From a police community partnership. It was a lot of labor for us, but we realized how valuable the community was and how much we needed their partnership to help us. And that agency and that community have a wonderful, wonderful relationship. They really do. Like, the citizens support them.
This was a town of 100,000?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's say it was a lost and found call. Let's say the lady says, the reporting party says, I drove home and I went out to pick up my garbage bin from the side of the road, and I looked down and I found a wallet in the street. Who knows what the situation is? That would be a call one person could go to. People would call and say, hey, I found a hypodermic needle. Can you dispose of it for me? Yeah, that's a one-person call. A cold or a vehicle burglary that occurred, it's obviously not a hot case that you're going to chase somebody down. That could be a one-person call. Some sort of follow-up could be, but the vast majority of calls you need to have another officer. And it would all be the level of engagement, because heaven forbid I'm knee-deep in this thing, and next thing you know, I'm dealing with somebody who's a suspect, and then all of a sudden I know I'm going to have to effect an arrest. Oh, they've got a friend. And then someone else comes out of the woodwork, right?
And they're armed.
And you know what? The suspect that you're going to be dealing with, and maybe we'll just say a 2-person call, the victim may call just wanting the problem to stop. There's a crime that's there. You're going to arrest somebody, and then all of a sudden the victim now is fighting you to not take their
boyfriend or
into
whatever.
custody.
Yeah.
True story. Multiple times. Domestic violence in progress. The victim is being abused. We go. Evidence will support that. We go to make a felony arrest for domestic violence, and the next thing you know, the victim of this violence is now fighting us because we're trying to take their
The love of their life.
Yeah. And there's a lot of reasons why. Like, if you were to get into kind of the thought process on this, right? Like, if that person's in jail, who's going to help me with the bills? Who's going to help me with the kids? Who's going to help me with the house? Who's going to do this? That's my source of income. They're the only person that's working. There's so many reasons why that all...
Like, oh, I changed my mind.
So a lot of times when they call, they just want you to stop the violence, not necessarily arrest the perpetrator.
Yes, they call initially to stop it, right? Because they want it to end, and then
That's it.
They think that we're just going to go, oh, you guys need to part ways. But in California, rightfully so, and the vast majority of the states in the union
Kiss
in
and
this
make
way,
up.
Right.
but in California, rightfully so, especially with domestic violence because of the lethality factor of domestic violence. And what I mean by that is, and again, I'm not making light of any, but just hear me out. Today's push is tomorrow's slap, is the next day's punch, is the next day's choking, is the next day's strangulation to unconsciousness. And I'm very, 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 very heartbroken to say this, that I have been to crime scenes where the victim has been battered multiple times and that victim is eventually murdered. And I remember responding to a call for domestic violence, and now they're murdered. Now they're dead.
So what happens to Seth when Seth gets home from something like that?
Yeah, that's yeah. There's a lot of compartmentalizing that's going on. You're seeing things that you wouldn't wish upon your worst enemy to have to see and or do, and you are duty bound. You're moving forward with what you have, and then you take the uniform off and you go home. The problem with that is a lot of this lingers with you. And I described before, you don't realize how far you're gone you are until you come back to center and you go back to that PTSD or PTSI, right? It carries with you. That level of hypervigilance stays with you. The things you see stay with you. The thoughts about it, the decisions that you made in a split second at that time. I mean, I don't want to use the word haunts isn't the right word, but you have dreams about that sort of stuff. Fortunately for me, is like I said before, I married a wonderful Christian woman who was so strong in the Lord. I shared probably 99.9% of everything I did every day with her. Now,
Wow.
I may not go into specifics and say,
Not sure of the pictures.
yeah, I may not go into specifics and say the victim's name was blank. No, that's not, no, but just she needed to know what I was dealing with or dealt with that day,
Totally.
so she could understand why I may be in a state, like a funky state or melancholy or distant or something of that nature, right? She needed to know that. And unfortunately, again, it's every husband and wife's decision or boyfriend, girlfriend's decision on this, is that I don't think enough officers share with their spouses,
Wow.
whether it's man or male or female, their spouses, about how their day was. Because you work a 9-to-5 job at an office doing blank, the stress levels aren't really going to be there in comparison. There's going to be stress levels, but it's a different sort of stress. Ours is a life and death stress.
Yeah.
And to come home and be aloof or short-tempered, and then a fight starts, and that's what will lead to relationships that are poor because of it.
Man.
Another thing that you made mention and what we discussed is, we ultimately get around to kind of the testimony of this. And as a man of faith, no matter what I'm doing in my life, right? I'm a husband, I'm a father, I coach baseball. That's an identity as well. Law enforcement officer, that's identity as well. But my true identity is in Jesus Christ.
Amen.
As a man of faith. And for me, I don't know what I would have done in my life as a professional law enforcement officer. And I considered my law enforcement career as a ministry. Any opportunity I had to shine Christ's love and project that on others, I wanted to be able to do in the most subtle ways, or sometimes it was maybe right to the point. I don't know what I would have done without Christ, without Christ in my life. In seeing violence and hatred every day.
Well, one of the things that our culture is continually perpetuating is this idea that love is just affirming, that love is just whatever you want to do, I'm going to affirm it. And, well, being a police officer, you can't affirm when someone's doing drugs. You can't affirm when someone's being violent. And there's a large part of, I think a lot of pastors miss this in ministry, where you have to be stronger. Like pastors talk a lot about church discipline and how hard it is to enact, because we've lost the ability to say, I love you, you shouldn't be doing this, it is harming you. And, so it's the idea that you would be a minister to the community, I think is a very valid one.
Yeah. And there's times and places for what I would call that crucial conversation where emotions and the stakes are high, and you're having that talk, right, with somebody, because you don't know which direction it's going to go. If you truly loved that person the way Christ would love that person, and then obviously held to that eternal standard as brothers and sisters in the faith, like we are on the podcast, held to that higher standard, you're expected to tell someone when they're falling short in a certain area, but you're going to do it with Christ's love. So an example of that would be, if not a law enforcement example, but if I allowed my sons to allow their poor behavior because they're just kind of growing through their lives?
Yeah.
Or am I going to hold them accountable for poor behavior? So in the law enforcement setting, right, there's an old expression, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't get the horse to drink. So I'll give you an example. So I don't know how many times I have literally seen people a slave to drugs. They're slaves to it. And they're literally in the gutters, literally in the gutter. And the opportunity arises, and there's so many programs that the state has to help somebody potentially rehabilitate from that, but their heart has to want to make the decision. Everybody's going to hit rock bottom. Hopefully your rock bottom is before you die.
Yeah.
Right? So you can start that road to recovery, because some people's rock bottom is not that way, and very, very sad, exactly as I described with those tragic domestic violence scenes that I would go to. I stood over many people who had overdosed that just a few days prior I was talking to them about the grip of the substance abuse. Man. Now, you and I in this room, we can recognize that as an eternal struggle for a soul. That's what that is.
Yeah.
The stakes are very high when it comes to spending eternity in the presence of God, or spending eternity in conscious punishment in hell, separated from God. That is I'm getting the goosebumps thinking about it. That is such a thought,
Right.
to be lost forever. It's almost more than like I can handle to discuss. So I felt that when the time arose, and I'm not going to go out and Bible thump somebody, but as the time arose, I thought that the conversation needed to be had. Hey, I have resources right now. If you're ready to go right now, I can get you a clean and sober house for 6 months. I can transition for you after that 6 months for another 6 months. So for the next year, you can be on the road to recovery rent free. Let me help you right now. If you're willing to extend your hand, I will make a phone call and we can make this work. Some people took me up on that offer, us up on that offer. Other folks would say, you know what? Here's the problem, is the fact that I'm gonna have to be accountable to somebody. I want to go on my own time, at my own pace. I'm not willing to give this up right now. I don't want to change. I don't want to do it. I'm happy doing what I'm doing. And literally, I would say, you would rather live in the berry bushes in the creek, a slave to your addiction, than have a chance to recover with people that can help you in a setting that will provide what you need for the next path of success in your life.
And you would think that was rock bottom.
Yeah.
You would think.
Yeah,
Well-
and they would say, I'd rather be here.
Oh, wow.
You know, the thing is that people that are that type of slave, when they're addicted to things like that, they don't have normal interactions with people.
Yeah.
So if you're reaching out to them, you're probably the only sober or clean person they're truly interacting with for long periods of time. Yep. And so I imagine, as a standard for being an officer, you have to hold yourself to a higher standard, but also, you know, that's a heavy burden to think about. And, you know, you were talking about your wife supporting you and you telling her stuff like that. And as pastors, we understand that we can't move in ministry unless our wives are supportive. That's just kind of the truth of it. And it's really hard. So that's really kind of amazing. But, you know.
And what about the divorce rate?
Yeah, let me talk on that in a second.
Yeah.
You talk about even when that person is literally in the gutter, living in the berry bushes, just in their own squalor, per se, I always would and I would tell every cop I ever talked to about this, and I had a chance to train dozens of officers over the years and supervise dozens more. I would always say, always treat that person with dignity and respect, because they don't have it in their life. They can't even respect themselves, but you treat them with respect, and always be that person who could help them out. I would always introduce myself by my first name. I mean, they could obviously see I was a sergeant. They could obviously see I was with the police department, but I wanted them to know me behind or underneath the badge. I'm Seth. Here's my card. Give me a call. The divorce rates. Yeah, so in law enforcement, right, the divorce rates are going to be higher because of the fact that there are so many stresses that the law enforcement officer is dealing with, that it's very difficult to come home and lead a normal life, right? Because you have all this built up tension of all these things that you've seen, and there's no potentially release for it. For me, that was telling my wife about my day. So she knew. And she knew that I was probably going to be distant or surly, but at least she knew where I was coming from as a whole. And would also, involving that, which is, I mean, sad in and of itself, is the fact that cops get cops, but they only get each other because they feel that they've been in the trenches together on this. And some other issues, let's throw a few other little circumstances that come into play. Sometimes it's difficult for a husband or a boyfriend to have a wife or a girlfriend that's in law enforcement, to have that kind of assertive career in that instance. And heaven forbid, it is what it is. Unfortunately, the divorce rate is a lot higher in law enforcement as well, is because you think that person that you share a car with, that you've been in the trenches with, that's gone to the calls and you've commiserated and you've cried with, you think that person gets you. And for some very odd and weird reason, that people are attracted to each other because of that. And then you see issues and problems with infidelity associated with that, which is really sad. I mean, this profession, for me, I can speak to it. I needed a support unit in a lot of ways. And a lot of that came from my spouse, my family, the church as a whole, and what that looks like, because I couldn't imagine life without Christ in it. And then ultimately Jesus Christ being the ultimate support for me, and me literally stop talking and start to listen to the guidance of the Holy Spirit in my life.
Yeah.
And what I needed to do. And I want to be in the Lord's will. I want to be in the Lord's will desperately.
Yeah.
The problem is sometimes he has to take me there kicking and screaming.
Hi, Postmaster.
Howdy.
Howdy.
I'm sorry I'm late. I've been about my father's business.
Were you with the Mormons again?
Church work.
Sorry, everybody. We
Church
just
work.
He's been at a protest. No. Yeah, we're glad to have you back.
Bo just sat
thanks for having
down.
me.
Hi, guys.
We are going to talk about my experiences. I mean, we have experiences here from a law enforcement officer, but do we have experiences from someone who's had a ride along? Well, I got to ride along with Seth for 3 hours.
I'm so jealous.
And one part about it, I mean, it was actually a little more action than I expected, because it was like a call where there was a death, and it was an overdose. And that was weighty. It was very much like a pastoral call, because it was a teenage girl. And Seth maybe share a little bit about that, because that gave me an insight to the pastoral side. It wasn't a crime, but you had to treat it, obviously, as an investigation. But you're with the family for a long time.
Yeah. That call, Pastor, when you came out, and it was wonderful to have you out. And again, you don't know what the day is going to hold in store. I figured you and I would just go call the call. I'd kind of show you around town, let you see how the officers worked and that sort of thing. Maybe we get into something exciting, who knows? And that call came out, and I remember the call specifically. It was non-responsive teenager. I think it may have been something cold to the touch, which would indicate that they've been passed for a while. And I remember hearing it, and I stood up from my desk, and I started walking out past you. And I said, "Hey, Pastor, we got to go." I said, "I need you to pray. I need you to pray right now." And I remember as we got in the call, kind of briefing you on what we were going to see and what this was going to be like. Now, en route to that call, again, this is, and we can discuss this as we go, this is me asking Jesus Christ, asking the Holy Spirit to go before me in calls like this. Because I know that Seth the man is not going to be able, or my emotions, my being itself may not be able to cope with something, and I need God to help me through this, right? And I want to make sure I armor myself up in the Lord on these calls. So I ask you to pray. We talk about this call, and then lo and behold, which is a tragic event, a teenage girl took pills, overdosed, and committed suicide. It was apparent that it was a suicide, but you have to look at all options. And a lot of things are going on. Number one, the family. And I'll be honest, you don't know how the family's going to react. I've gone to death calls where the family's extremely violent, and then you're struggling with the family over their grief.
Wow.
I've gone to other calls where they don't even look like they're grieving. And you don't know why they're not responding in a way you think someone would respond in grief. So you never know what you're going to run into. But I remember this call, praying on the way over there for that. that the Lord go before me to help me manage that scene in an appropriate manner. I remember very vividly, I had two very young cops that were assigned to my team at that time, both less than a year on. I have to be respectful of their emotions and their psyche as well, and help them be the very best, the professionals they could be. Not only to be their supervisor, their boss, but also someone who they can lean on to help them work through some of these emotions, but also the professional side of the job and doing their investigation. I remember you outside. You're outside,
Yeah.
kind of walking around a little bit. And again, I don't believe in happenstance or coincidence. I have no doubt in my mind, I am certain of this, that you there that day, that call was a divine appointment. And we can describe that in a second. So I'm talking about I'm talking to the family, trying to be, they're already gutted over this. I
Yeah.
couldn't imagine losing one of my boys.
Because she was struggling with addiction for a long time.
Yeah, and depression, right? Yeah. And
Wasn't her first attempt.
yeah, and I couldn't imagine losing my son. So to see mom and dad in that state and in them in shock and in grief, you have to be the very best professional you can to attend to their needs at that time. I'm technically in uniform and I'm the shift supervisor, but I'm not at this moment. I'm someone there that needs to care for them and provide them with as much as I can. Remember, we talk about the stranger being called into someone's home? This is that moment where I need to make sure I do the very best for them. And the easiest way for me to do that, where I need to go, is I need to go directly back to Christ and just be pulled in close to him and allow him to go before me in these sort of calls. So providing them the care and the nurturing they need and being with them, answering questions, being there a little longer than maybe most. But then I remember as they're there, the mom looks out the window and she sees Pastor Ryan, and he's kind of, it's a nice day outside, so he's just kind of walking, hanging out. And I'm going back and forth telling Pastor what we're seeing and that sort of thing. And she says, "Oh, who's that out there?" And I said, "Oh, that's my pastor. He's on a ride along with me today." And she goes,
Wow.
"Oh, we go to church on occasion. Please invite him in." And I'm like, "Oh, this is wonderful. This is absolutely perfect." Now we talk about eternity. Only the Lord knows our hearts, right? And only the Lord knows this girl's heart. I have no idea where she stands or where she stood in her relationship with the Lord, if there ever was one, right? But I said, this is that moment. This is that opportunity. How can I today, in that moment, Seth, that sergeant, how can I be the best Jesus Christ for that person at that given moment? And then to invite our pastor in to be able to speak with them as well. And there was a softening in that room at that time to allow Pastor Ryan to come in and allow the Holy Spirit to work through him to be able to speak to that family in grief. And what was really good for me at that moment is I didn't really remove myself because I was still involved in the call, but I kind of removed myself from being the person that was speaking with mom and dad. And I think there was an older sister, and let Ryan provide that comfort and care in that moment of tragedy. An absolute blessing to be able to have him there for that, in that circumstance. It brings something up as we were talking about praying to that call. I would always pray on the way into work. Every shift I would pray, "Lord, things are going to happen today that are going to be difficult for me to handle, that I'm not going to understand. Help me recognize danger before it happens. Help me protect myself and my partners in the community. Give me the strength and peace to persevere on your behalf." And I would pray that, but then on certain calls for service, I would continue to expand off that prayer. And this is where I think the human body, the physiology of what the body does, and this incredible machine, this beautiful creation that God created in us as human beings, works. So I'm en route to the call, in uniform. I just tell it how it is. I'm typing with one hand on the computer in the car. People are communicating with me. I'm driving with my knee, talking on the radio, praying at the same time, looking around at my surroundings as I'm driving. All this is happening within fractions of a second. And I think about, let's say it's a domestic violence call in progress. I'm playing out every scenario in my mind that I could think of over the couple-minute call it may take to get there of what may happen. So when I'm confronted with that situation, to potentially have to use force or not, as we described, I've already role-played it out in my mind to the very best of my ability. I show up, the house is all quiet. I show up, I hear yelling and screaming. I show up and I hear, "Stop it, you're hurting me," bang, whack, boom. I show up and a victim comes running out in the front yard to me. I show up and there's a man standing out in the front yard who wants to confront you. He seems unarmed. I show up and there's someone in the front yard who's standing out there with a gun. I was talking to my coworker at work who, in that exact situation, this did not happen to me, but it was him, but I was explaining this to him about these scenarios you play out in your mind. He says, lo and behold, I was right around the corner, decided to go to it, and lo and behold, the guy shows up with a gun, and I jump out of the car. I can't even get my pistol out of the holster, and the guy kills himself in front of me. Oh. And yeah, you don't know what the day is going to bring. You don't. And there's a finality in that, right? Like, how did the day get to this point where our lives would intersect and it was so bad for that person that their out was suicide or homicide and then suicide? That's really where, man, that's deep when you start to think about how you
very deep.
Yeah.
Very dark.
So that's the long answer to a question.
So in your training as a law enforcement officer, they're not training chaplains. So, what kind of training do you receive for the kind of situations that you are going to encounter when the agency or whatever is assuming that they're not assuming you're a Christian, they're assuming you're just a regular guy.
So the chaplaincy in and of itself, and I'm not going to speak for any particular jurisdiction or county, I'm going to speak as a whole. When you hear chaplaincy, you think of it being faith-based, God-centered. But unfortunately, the chaplaincy has turned itself into more of kind of a caretaker, therapeutic sort of role. And again, to remain nameless for certain jurisdictions, sometimes God was discouraged from being interjected into a conversation for fear of it affecting an ethnicity or someone who has a religion that isn't based off of the Almighty, right? And Christ. So it became more of kind of this feel good is not the right word. I'm selling a little short. But to your point, to add on to that, only recently, I will say truly only recently, within the last maybe 10 years or so, have agencies, have law enforcement associations throughout the country focused on the wellness side of the officer and what we're encountering and how we are to deal with and figure these things out. And we discussed this a bit earlier. I wanted to know why I felt the way I felt about certain things. And from a physiology point of view, once I learned why I felt the way I felt about certain things, it was easier for me to grasp that and go, oh, that's just common human nature. You don't feel like you're isolated on an island, like, am I the only person that's affected this badly by this call that I just saw? But then you realize you're all, and this is the term, suffering in silence is what it is. The law enforcement profession, double the normal workforce rate, experiences double the amount of suicide than the average law enforcement rate because of this suffering in silence. And let's just be honest, for years it was stigmatized. It really was, like stiff upper lip, the machismo, like, you got into this job, handle your business.
And tough it out, man.
Yeah. You know what? You can't take this all in. I mean, how many times are you, if the cup is at the top, how many more drops of water can you put in before it runs over, right? So going back to what we had is I wanted to know why I felt the way I felt. So I became the supervisor of our peer support and wellness team for the agency that I work with. And then I said, you know what? I know there's others that are dealing with the same things I was dealing with. To be honest, it was very therapeutic for me to work with my coworkers as we went, oh, we are dealing with this. We are. And how do now we have a little emotional support. We are bringing in psychologists and doctors to help us kind of work through some of that. All kinds of different stuff, which was wonderful. We would have these wellness retreats in these days where we would try to do certain things, just focusing on that. And agencies are starting to change, and it's not so stigmatized on its surface. I still think it's going to be that law enforcement professional's decision whether they want to share that. Very, very sad state of affairs is we had an officer at my department who was struggling with psychologically from stress. and was out for a period of time. Thank goodness for them for coming forward and saying, I'm struggling. I need help. I need a break. I overheard in the locker room one day, a couple cops, shame on them for saying, I don't know if I want to be this guy's partner if he's that weak-minded. Shame on them. I heard that and immediately interjected. Like, how dare you say that? This guy has more courage than everybody combined. And I'm getting the goosebumps thinking about it because you know what? I was one of those guys that suffered in silence. I probably should have taken that break too. But you know what? I was duty bound. I was going to do the very best I could for my community, for my partners, for those that worked for me. And I use this as an example, and I'll stay it till the end of time. Seth Cimino, the law enforcement professional, gave A+ service to 90,000 strangers, 100,000 strangers in the community that he served, and A+ service to the 150 law enforcement professionals at the agency I worked for, and I gave C- D service at best to my wife and to my sons, at best, because I was so drained. I had nothing left that was worth giving, right? And that's where, and I couldn't imagine a life without Christ. If it was that bad with Christ, and then you realize you don't how far gone you are until you come back to center. And so,
man, this has been, we're going to make an ad hoc call here because this has been so good. We're going to do a second episode. So for the sake of you, hey, just so you know, feels like a cliffhanger. We're going to hit a second episode. So like and subscribe, share this, help us get our followers up to 100. So, and we will follow up again in the next episode. Thank you so much, Seth.
Thank you,
Yes.
Seth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
my pleasure. Yeah.